Hello and welcome back to the Amoral Philosopher blog. Thank you for watching. This is the next episode in this series of talks about discrimination. And today we're going to talk about discrimination on the basis of accent. We'll use that as our today's example. Before we get to that, let me briefly remind you that last time we talked of how whether discrimination based on a particular trait in given circumstances can be wrongful or permissible depending on the chosen priority between various considerations that may come into clash with each other. So whether discrimination is wrongful or permissible becomes relativized to the priority that we might want to set between these competing considerations. But we haven't talked really about who gets to set these priorities between the clashing considerations. And as you may imagine, a lot might depend on that. This may create a separate second sense of relativity, as the wrongfulness of discrimination may be relative to the value priorities set by particular individuals or different social groups, or perhaps the society as a whole, or different nations, or the whole international community. And this may give rise to both inter and intra-group disagreements on the issues of discrimination. So people may disagree on how the priority among the conflicting considerations ought to be set. And this is sometimes referred to as the cases of pragmatic disagreement, or disagreement over what ought to be the case. In these cases, it is difficult to find an argument in support of one's view, because the question of what is the relevant trait in the given circumstances implies a certain degree of objectivity, which seems to be lacking in reality. And this can be explained by there being no rationally explicable way to set the priorities among the clashing values, because the values appear to be incommensurable. That is to say, they cannot be reduced to a common measure. So last time we discussed the COVID-19 case, the case of potential medical discrimination against the elderly and the people with pre-existing conditions who might be denied access to intensive care units in order to save more lives. And this is one example of that, an example of a genuine value conflict of on the one hand, valuing every individual as an ends in themselves, and on the other hand, valuing the benefit of the greatest number. So another case that we're going to talk about today to illustrate this is that of foreign actors in the UK. The kind of discrimination that they're facing is that a lot of them, despite being great actors, have a particular accent depending on what country they're coming from. And because of their accent, they're denied parts in films or plays other than those of their specific ethnic origin because of their foreign accent. Well, when you think of it, on one hand, if you go back a couple of episodes and you think of it from the point of view of a control theory of discrimination, you can say, well, this is a feature outside of the person's control, and we shouldn't be discriminating against people on this basis. But on the other hand, you might think, well, in this case, this particular trait, a person's ability to speak with the native accent is really relative. And so any actor that's worth their salt should be able to talk in an accent that the role presupposes. And so the discrimination is perhaps permissible in this given case. So one may claim that having a proper UK accent is a relative trait when applying for a role in UK film, because the film has to be representative of the society or the UK culture at large. But a point can be made on behalf of the accents that the United Kingdom is a multi-ethnic and multicultural society where immigrants play an important role. So for instance, the proportion of the National Healthcare Service workers with foreign accents perhaps warrants a similar proportion of actors portraying them in medical dramas, which is currently not the case. So if you think of it from this angle, you might think, well, yeah, perhaps we need a little bit more of foreign accented actors portraying NHS workers and other immigrants playing an important role in the society, in films. Um, so assume that you exclude any. Well, first of all, let's see who gets to make the decision. Obviously, the first people that come to mind are the film directors and the producers who are making the casting decisions in these films. And suppose they may have some prejudices against foreigners for some reason, but suppose we set those aside, and we also assume that films casting foreign actors can be no less commercially successful than the films with exclusively British actors, because perhaps these films would be more interesting to the international audience in the UK. So if we set aside if we exclude any prejudices against foreigners and assume that the films casting foreign actors are just as commercially successful, there can be two incompatible values at play here, explaining the controversy and the dispute that we may have. One is the end of presenting a realistic reflection of the multi-ethnic society, and if we accept that principle, then perhaps we should have more actors with foreign accents. On the other hand, there is the end of preserving the cultural or linguistic traditions of the country. And people may accept both of these values to some extent, the value of multiculturalism and the need for a certain degree of assimilation and preservation of national culture, but they may disagree as to how the balance between these two ought to be struck. They may disagree as to which of the two need to be prioritized in the given case. And so the negative effect of discrimination on the actors is placed, as it were, on one side of the scale, together with multiculturalism. So what do we make of this? Well, my view is that because morality is a communal enterprise, while there is always room for some inter-societal disagreements, the wrongfulness of discrimination is typically relative to the priorities between competing considerations, which is set by the society as a whole. It is a separate issue how the society resolve potential pragmatic disagreements and achieve some kind of a consensus on a given issue, and we can talk more about this. But suffice it to say that raising awareness of the considerations in play and initiating a public discussion of the matter is always a good start. So in the actor's case, just being aware of the different considerations that people may have in mind and making these considerations a part of the debate on the issue of whether discrimination should be permissible or whether it should be considered wrongful in the given case is a good start for the society as a whole to make a judgment in the given case. One of the upsides of understanding the wrongfulness of discrimination in the way that we have suggested is that it facilitates public moral dialogue and excludes the kind of demonization of one's opponent's position. So, for instance, to go back to the COVID-19 case, if one chooses to discriminate against elderly people in the COVID-19 case, one can say that it is not because one has no consideration for elderly people or because one hates them, but simply because one judges other considerations, such as saving more lives, more important when faced with the difficult task of allocating scarce medical resources. Or in the actor's case, when someone judges the discrimination against actors with foreign accents is wrongful, it is not because one doesn't value the traditions of the country, but simply because one wants to assign more value to multiculturalism, for instance. So the the public moral dialogue in cases like this ultimately fosters public acceptance of the policy choices and public cohesion. But despite the possibility of cohesion, one implication of the view is that there is no one universal way to set a priority once and for all, to pick a set of protected traits or characteristics that would be sacrosanct in some way in all circumstances, and that discriminating on the basis of would always be wrongful. Next time we'll talk of the potential problems for this view, and I will see you soon.